Hello everybody and welcome. If you've been looking for having an introduction to building multi-agent experiences with Agent Builder, well, you've come to the right room. Thank you so much for joining. I'm hoping you have a great post-con experience so far. My name is Philippe Ozil. I'm a developer advocate at Salesforce, and it's my great pleasure to be here with you all today. A few things about me. I've been with Salesforce for the last 9 years, and we've been very active on the Postman front. We have a public API workspace which is kind of very visible. We got a couple of awards today, Best API Awards and Developer's Choice Award. I'm also honored to be part of the Postman Leaders program, and this is a community of peers who are really trying to make the best use of Postman tools these days. You can hit me up on social, a couple of social channels, and yeah, happy to chat about APIs. That's really one of my fun things that I like to explore. Because I work with Salesforce, I have to give you this wall of text. I know it's a bit intimidating, but this is called the forward-looking statement. We are a publicly traded company, so I may talk about things that are not yet part of the Salesforce product. So if you intend to buy Salesforce at some point, well, please make your purchasing decisions based on what's commercially available in the product and not on forward-looking statements that I may make. All right, let's get this out of the way. We're not here to sell anything. Today, what I want to talk about is a bit of an introduction first to the Agentic Era, what it means to build agent, what is an agent actually. Then I'll head into some more advanced concepts I'll talk about headless agents in particular. We'll talk about the technologies that support such use cases. And we can see that things are evolving very fast in this space. To be honest, from the time I submitted this talk to right now, I have written those slides a couple of times already, and it's every day there's something new in the agentic technology world. So I'm going to try to keep up with this and show you what's the latest. And finally, I'll finish with some demonstration of how you can build multi-agent experiences using those technologies. All right, let's get started and let's go into the Agentic Era. If you've been watching the keynote with Abhinav and team, you've probably seen a lot of really cool, exciting announcements. And I'm going to take it back to some years back. And before we had agents, we had something called chatbots. I don't know if you've experienced with chatbots, but we were very dumb. I would say basically a decision tree where there was no proper AI really involved. And the way this was built was with structured information. Again, like I mentioned, it was a decision tree going A, going B, depending on the customer inputs. This was already helpful because it helped us reduce the amount of work for service customer assistance, for example. And then as time went, we started getting more and more AI. And another phase, which I think was really game-changing, was the rise of machine learning. So machine learning wouldn't let you have a proper conversation with an AI agent, but still it would help you because it would be able to predict certain actions, predict outcomes based on certain calculation. When talking about machine learning, we're still in structured space. But then we had more recently a new phase, a new era there. We started working with large language models, and we all saw ChatGPT and the other LLMs out there. And when we go into this Gen AI phase, we really go into an unstructured world. And this is just the beginning, because nowadays we're at the next level. We're talking about autonomous agents. And I really want to make the distinction between what we call an LLM and an autonomous agent. Today we're going to be focusing on autonomous agents. We're not going to be talking about LLMs so much. And I'm going to explain how you can use those to build those next generation experiences, namely headless agents and multi-agent experiences. So how do you get to these? So first of all, I think we all need to define together what is an AI agent. There are a lot of definitions. I don't think there's anything standard in there. So I'm going to take some of the key, I would say, aspects of an AI agent, and let's make sure we all agree with those. So what is an AI agent? Well, the first thing that I say defines an agent is that it takes in an input and outputs multimodal information. So what do I mean by that? Text is fine, but we can go and do better than text. We can take images, documents, sound, video, all of these things. We can take them as a prompt input, and we can output also these things. So that's the first thing. The fact that we are not limited to text only, that's a huge gap between the traditional LLMs. Then, the thing that makes an agent is reasoning, the ability to plan, to chain actions, to devise a plan of action to get from a prompt to an output. That's not necessarily something an LLM can do. But what makes a plan powerful is the fact that the plan is composed of actions. And that, I think, if you have to take something away of this session, is that actions are the key components of agents. Agents can act. They can act on third-party systems. They can act on pretty much anything. Without the ability to act, you would just have an LLM that would be reading information for you. And I'll demonstrate in this session a number of ways in which you can implement such actions and AI agents. So that's really in a nutshell what I consider to be an agent. There are multiple companies that build agents, but that's, I think, holds true for most of them. So how do we get from these agents to headless agents? What is a headless agent? I mean, that's not something we see every day, and I think that's really the next evolution in this space. And multi-agent experiences is also something that helps us bridge the gap and go from a text-based LLM into something that is really different. Because we're no longer limited to chat interfaces, we can build some really, really interesting scenarios, and I'll share some examples later on. But the idea is that you don't need a human typing in a chat box to get some output. You can build something that is more autonomous, that can work on the back end, that can work autonomously, maybe schedule with a timer, or that can run based on receiving emails, things like that. And with this capability of running headless agents comes another capability which is also very interesting, the ability to create multi-agent experiences. So it's a matter of splitting roles and responsibilities from one agent to other agent, distributing the work across multiple agents. And we're seeing this as the ability to do agent-to-agent collaboration. And this is really greenfield. I don't think there's anything in this space that is yet production ready, but that's the things I want to talk about today and explore with you all. So how do we get there? What is a multi-agent system? I'm going to give you a very simple example I think we can all understand. I'm going to take an example that is based on a loan application scenario, and this is what I will be demoing later on. The idea is simple. You need to have a single user interface so that your customers interact with your workflow. You don't want to have them running around, talk to different services, pick up the phone, send emails, open tickets. That's the old ways. Now, with multi-agent system, you can do things differently. You have on one side an orchestrator agent, in which will be the first contact point of your customer. And this orchestrator agent will delegate some of this work to a bunch of specialized agents. These specialized agents will be responsible for a certain part of the workflow. So for example, we can have a second agent responsible for doing document verifications, checking that all of the loan application documents were properly filled, they are authentic, there's no fraud, nothing is missing. We can have another agent doing the credit score analysis, making sure we collect all the right information, credit history, etc., to validate that the loan application also is complete and valid. Then another one to do the risk analysis, making sure that based on the documents and the credit score that is defined and the user profile, everything looks good. And finally, maybe one last agent that does the final loan decision. Everything, of course, could fit into one single agent, but the power of those distributed systems is that you can really specialize the agents. You can use separate LLMs. You can also use maybe partners in this whole workflow. You're not limited to a single company owning the entire stack anymore. You can distribute the work really. But with this, there comes a number of things you have to be careful and mindful of. The first thing is that AI is not stochastic, and I think we've been repeating this over and over in this space. What stochastic means is that you cannot predict reliably what an AI agent will respond after using the same prompt 100 times. Sometimes you'll get hallucinations, and that is very hard to control. You don't have a guarantee that the prompt will give you the right result. And when it comes to critical workflows like a loan application, well, you're betting a bit on these technologies. So that's the first challenge, I think, the ability to have something that is more predictable, because you're not building a proper workflow which is very deterministic. You're building something that is a bit more agile, I would say, so prone to error. The other risk is that this kind of workflow is hard to secure. You could be, by using prompt injection, you could be trying to get to certain steps ahead without going through the traditional steps of the workflow. And that's the beauty of it, because by lowering the implementation effort, not having to draw every possible steps and every possible user scenario, you can take some shortcuts, but these shortcuts also expose you to injection and attacks. So after all, it's really a trade-off between going fast, having something very flexible, very agile, and have something robust. And I think there's a lot of work being done in this space at the moment. So now we've seen what an AI agent, a multi-agent experience is, let me talk to you about the technologies that support such use cases. And I want to be honest with you, because I mentioned that I had to rewrite some of these slides a couple of times. There's going to be a divide between what are the technologies of tomorrow and what we can use today. So tomorrow, we're going to have a lot of unified standards that help us drive those experiences, but today it's a bit more disconnected and a bit less standard, I would say. So the ideal stack in the future will be a three-tier stack. On top, you'll have A2A, or agent to agent. Then under this, you'll have MCP, and at the bottom, you'll have APIs. APIs are here to stay. They're still relevant. There's no question about it. The question is more, how many levels do you need between your orchestrator agent and the source and the tools that you have at the bottom of the stack? So let's go and take a look at this and drill down into these different stacks. At the top of the pyramid, you have the agent-to-agent protocol. I'll talk more about it recently, but the goal of the agent-to-agent protocol is to help coordinate tasks between multiple agents. So talking between the orchestrator agent and the specialized agent, exchanging capabilities, discussing how to split the tasks between those different agents. Then under this, you have MCP. MCP is really going big these days. You can hear about it on the news all the time. But that's a good foundation for the way agents work with tools. This is where the MCP model context protocol sits, between agents and tools. You wouldn't be using MCP between agents and agents. That's, I think, a clear distinction you have to make there. And I did mention that you have APIs, well, that's the bottom layer. Between your MCP servers and your agents and your data sources, you'll still use APIs. There's no question about it. They're here to stay. But the MCP servers can be generated very automatically, as Postman demonstrated, based on solid APIs. So how do we use all of these technologies? And I want to explain a bit more what these do. Let's take a look first at the Model Context Protocol, or MCP. MCP was first released by Anthropic 7 months ago. It's really based on a client-server architecture, and I think so far most of the use cases are using MCP server in an IDE, like things like Cursor or all the other tools like this, or Cloud Desktop. So this is more like a user local approach and not so much of a distributed use case. As time goes by, we'll see more of these MCP applications being available to cloud-hosted LLMs. But for now, this is more something that rests on a developer's machine or on a desktop client, I would say. The goal of MCP is really to do an inventory of the different tools and capabilities that a client has. And the way this works is that it sends a very well-defined and short set of messages which are structured. It works with stdio, which is a binary format, and HTTP, in particular, server-sent events or event-driven events. But it has a couple of drawbacks that I think are a bit of an adoption issue within the enterprise world. The first releases on MCP did not handle well security. And when you come from the enterprise world, well, authorization and authentication are two things that you really want to be sure of handling correctly. So that's, I think, what is missing right now. But obviously, as this is a living document, the MCP protocol will evolve and will probably patch those. And they recently introduced, by the way, support for OAuth. That's already solving kind of these issues. But I want to be clear about the fact that these, again, work with APIs. So your MCP's server or clients are behind the scenes using APIs. So you do need this strong foundation of APIs in order to build those experiences. You wouldn't be able to proceed and go further without these APIs. Then there are a number of ways you can write or use MCP servers. Of course, you can write your own. There are SDKs that are available out there. But there are smaller ways, I mean faster ways of doing this. You can reuse vendor-provided MCPs to do that. Here, there's a broad range of options. Because I work with Salesforce, well, I have to talk about our solutions. We have a product called Heroku, which lets us host MCP servers. It's something we use especially for DevOps, AIOps, and scaling development. We also have another product which is called MuleSoft, which lets you host and deploy APIs. So there's an API gateway in there, and it also supports an MCP server generator out of those APIs. But since this is a Postman conference, I need to talk about Postman, obviously. And as you saw during the keynote, there are a number of ways you can use Postman to create MCP servers. There are actually two key things that I've used to build MCP servers, namely using the public MCP server catalog, getMCP at postman.com. That's basically taking the entirety of a public API network and exposing it as MCP servers. Or you can even use the MCP server generation feature that is bundled within Postman client. And this is a screenshot of what you can do. You can select one of these public APIs, generate an MCP server by picking up the endpoints you want to use and generating a Node.js application out of it. No code required, and it will just start with a couple of scripts, and you're set to go. So this is how to do it very quickly. You don't need to reinvent the wheel here. If you already have a good documentation of your API, maybe an open API schema, or some Postman collections, you can really get started fast in this space. You don't need to touch an SDK there. Now, above MCP, I mentioned we have something called the agent-to-agent protocol, which is very, very new. It was launched about 3 months ago by Google, and it's supported by a large group of enterprise customers. Salesforce being one of them, we partner with about 50 other companies in shaping this protocol. The key difference between MCP and A2A is really the level at which we operate. This is not a tool level, this is now an application level, one step ahead. And it is also similar in the way that MCP works. It's a really client-server protocol, except you're talking between agents. A client is an agent and a remote agent is the server. One thing that I find interesting in this agent-to-agent protocol, as I learn more about it, is that the way it works is not distributed in the sense that it's a point-to-point protocol. We'll see later in the future, maybe we'll have some smarter ways, have maybe a bus of protocols that will allow us to connect multiple agents at the same time. But right now, it's really agent-to-agent only. It's not agent-to-many agents. And what this A2A protocol helps you do is really collaborate, basically, advertise the capabilities of the different agents, but not only in a sense about the tools or actions they can perform, but also the user experience that they can share. Are they able to support image? Are they able to support files? Are they able to have custom user interface? And they also work with task coordinations. So that's actually very important because the way MCP works is very short-lived, very like a burst of small requests, but agent-to-agent works on the longer term. When you have a conversation with an agent, it can be more than one prompt. You can be building context and iterating over this context. And the A2A protocol supports this because it's able to keep track of the context as multiple requests are getting chained. MCP doesn't deal with that well. So again, it's very complementary to MCP because it works with enterprise-grade security out of the box. Google haven't these kind of issues in the past, so it really helps with authentication and authorization, and it supports long-running tasks, as I mentioned. Now, there are some caveats because this is so new. There is no actual implementation apart from what Google did. Salesforce is working on one, but we're not ready to show it yet today. But I think it will be a new thing in the future. Most of us in the room probably won't need to build those. Hopefully, this will be shipped by the enterprise that are distributing those agents, but we never know. So let me now step back a bit. We've talked about the future, especially things very recent, very greenfield as A2A, but let's talk about what you can do today to use those agentic technologies. For us at Salesforce, we also have agents on our own, and one of our technologies that helped us build agents is called AgentForce. And we have an API that is available as a Postman collection to let you work with this. It's kind of similar to the way you could run MCP. It's also based on server-sent events and a bunch of REST requests. And that's how you can work with an agent right now. With this, with an API, you can really work in a headless mode, and you can already start building those multi-agent experiences. Obviously, you want something more standard in the future, so that will evolve to become maybe A2A. And let's take a look now at what we can do with these solutions. So let me just revive my computer and switch to my demo and see. Let's see. Yep, there we go. So we're now in Salesforce, and what we're going to be doing is using AgentForce, which is our agent. And I'm going to be asking for a series of prompts, and we're going to use it from a user perspective, and later on I'll switch to a more developer and more autonomous way. So within this tool, I can already ask simple questions like, show me my top accounts. We're looking at the CRM part of Salesforce, which deals with customer relationship management. So you basically have account executive working with customers, which are accounts. Here we have one of these accounts. I was hoping for actually a link there, so maybe I can directly go there. But normally, I should be able to dive in there. So we have one of our top accounts, which is Burlington Textile Corp America, and I can start to ask questions for this account. So here, for example, I've noticed that I have an invalid account emailed for one of my users, so I can already ask my agent to fix things. So I noticed that the email account is not good, so I'm asking my agent, like, fix it. And that's really the difference here again between an LLM and an agent. The LLM wouldn't be able to modify my data, but here, because it's an agent, it's able to modify my data. Now, as a best practice, you always want to have confirmation whenever you're interacting with data. So I'm going to confirm this, and you'll see it in real time. The email got updated there. So that's a very basic set of steps, and I can even go further. I could, for example, ask the agent to write an introduction email asking for a meeting to discuss sales, and you can see how this can go. Now, this is a basic set of operations you can do with AgentForce, but what's very interesting is that you can use the CRM core data, but you can also expand it to go and write custom actions. You can plug third-party APIs into the system, and you can build and scale beyond just the core CRM data. And I think that's really where the value lies. You're not limited to our platform. So we'll get back to that. I'll show you more about AgentForce when I talk a bit more about our use case for building multi-agent experiences. So back to the slides. We saw a glimpse of AgentForce, which is one of the agents we'll be using today to build those multi-agent experiences. But on top of AgentForce, we're also going to be using Postman AI Agent Builder. I've mentioned it during the keynote. They are building an entire stack to control and interact with agents. And that's part of the technologies I'm going to be using to host and work with agentic frameworks. And at the core of this stack, the AI Agent Builder, there are flows, and we'll be seeing some Postman flows that help us interact with different agents. So the flows, I think, are the most solid part, and there are a number of things which are being added as time goes by. For example, we have now the ability to host agent flows as actions. That's the second box there. And later on, they're going to be adding observability, and I think we got a glimpse at this during the keynote, which is going to be adding another level of integration. So as these blocks are being built, we can use them to create some multi-agent experiences. And I'm going to take you through an example. We're going to be seeing our agent API, and I'm going to show you how you can create a flow to interact with it when we go into this multi-agent experience. But basically, it's a drag and drop tool. It's not something terribly complicated. It's not something that requires a lot of time to set up. And it's already fast and efficient as a first step. So how do you get into this multi-agent experience? From all of these technologies, how can you build something that is truly multi-agent? How can you deliver value to your customers really rapidly? Well, I'm going to take the same diagram we saw before, the same use case about the loan application, and I'm going to split it into multiple technologies. The demo today that I'm going to be showing will involve Postman, will involve AgentForce, a bit of Mistral, and also a bit of Postman and a bit of AgentForce. So we have our scenario that we saw before with the orchestrator agent in the middle, distributing the work among multiple agents running on different technologies. And without any further ado, I'm going to go and show you what this means in practice. So now I'm going to switch over to Postman. And this is a public workspace. We have a number of APIs in there. And one of these APIs is the Agent API. Let me make sure that you can see it. And the Agent API lets us interact with AgentForce. It's just a couple of endpoints, very easy to use. And so what I'm going to do in this demo is I'm going to show you how we can use it. So obviously, it's a public API workspace, so we can fork. And I have already prepared a fork of this API collection, and I can already use it because I have configured it ahead. So whenever you interact with an agent, whether it's in headless mode or whether it is in a user interface, you start generally by authenticating. And then you start a session. So let me just do that, authenticate. I'm going to get an access token. There we go, using the access token. Then I can start a session. Starting a session is really much the same thing as opening a chat window. You're starting to open a dialogue. And all of the prompts and responses you're going to get are going to be part of a session or a conversation. So whenever you do that, you basically open a window to create context. So here I'm starting a new session. What I get is a session ID, and then we'll be using this to send multiple prompts. So in this case, we have different ways to send those prompts. We can send them in a synchronous mode or with a streaming mode. And I'm going to ask my agent, show me loan application, and yeah, show me a loan application. I'm going to ask that. Now, this is the first prompt I'm going to be sending as part of my conversation, and this is going to be sent to AgentForce. And normally, if everything goes well, I'm going to have those responses. So you see, we have text chunks, which are part of the response. What we had right now was a post request, which got upgraded to a server-sent event. And those text chunks are actually part of the response. So here it's actually didn't get sorry. Wrong use case. I'm not connected to the right org. So let me ask for something else. I'm going to ask, show me AI courses that last 2 hours. I'm actually not using the same demo org. So moving away slightly to a different use case, we can see progress indicators which reflect the fact that our agent is working and it's going to be retrieving information. And as it gets the response back, we're going to see another type of message, which are text chunks. The response doesn't come in as a single block. It's going to be brought into text chunks, and it's actually getting me the response. Here are some AI courses, blah, blah, blah. And I'll get multiple text chunks, and at some point, I'll get an informed message which contains the entirety of my response, namely a list of AI course recommendations. So that's one of the ways to use the API. And of course, you can iterate, because this is part of a conversation, it's part of a session. You can send additional prompts to refine and ask for action. So we're going to be using this Agent API. We're not going to use the collection directly. In fact, what we're going to do in the context of this demonstration, we're going to be using a flow. And so this flow will allow us to call the Agent API with a user interface. So here I've basically replicated the different requests we saw a minute ago. But this time, these requests are built as part of the flow. So it's a bit large for me to show in a single screen, but that's the whole process. You can see there's authentication, there's starting a session, sending a message. This time I'm using a synchronous endpoint, then ending the session, and then getting a response back. So let me just run this for you. I've already captured. I already have a scenario for this. I'm just going to go with my demo scenario. I'm going to run this, and you can see the chain of actions being completed. So we authenticate, and then we move on to different steps. And at the end, we'll get a response. And there we go. We get an agent response, result. And that is, oh, actually it didn't pick up. But anyways. That's the magic of AI. Sometimes it doesn't work. But the point is, at some point we should get the answer. So I'm going to pretend that it did work. Maybe this time it has in it and didn't get the right response. But you get those building blocks. The point is you create a flow, and you can use this flow as a tool to get a composition. So this first flow was using the Agent API. I have, for example, another flow here, which is going to be using Mistral. And this one is a bit simpler, but it's working the same way. You have a number of steps with actions, and you can chain them together. You can also take those flows built using Postman flow and deploy them as actions. So this Mistral AI flow here is going to be hosted as an action. So I've taken my Mistral flow here, and I've deployed it as an action, so it's available on an endpoint. So I can directly call this API endpoint. So next step for me is to run the multi-agent experience. So I can do this either from a Postman flow here, or I can go directly in AgentForce. For this, I'm going to go into AgentForce because I want to show you the debug statements, and I want to show you the different steps. But let me do this. So I mentioned that an agent is built with actions. And that's a core concept that lives in agents. And for the agent we're going to use today, we're going to use a tool called also AI Agent Builder, same as Postman, but it's a different tool. It's composed of topics, which are basically categories of actions. And in a topic, we have, of course, guidelines, description, classification, scopes. But we also have a library of actions. And for the multi-agent experience of today, the loan application experience, we're going to have different actions which are custom coded. For example, the call to a Mistral agent, which is going to be calling a Postman action with the endpoint we just saw earlier. we have an action that retrieves a loan application record and another action which calls the agent API on another Salesforce org. Before I run this, I just want to show you the data we'll be using for today's demo is actually in there. It's a record in our system. We have a loan application with all the information you would expect from a loan application, an application date and amount, details about the applicant, employment situation, financial situation, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this information will be the entry point, and it has also some documents. It'll be the entry point for our loan application workflow. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in our builder tool here, and I'm going to ask my agent to review this loan application. So I've given it the specific ID, and with that, it should be able to retrieve my loan application record. It should be able to distribute the work among the different agents, and we'll see in the center panel now the different tasks. So, all right, so maybe I messed up the, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting. Let me try again. Same thing, AI does mess up sometimes. So let's see. It should be able to pick up my loan application record. Oh, okay, well. So let's take a look at the debug. Identify record by name, loan application record, LA01234, which is my loan application record. So maybe I can ask it, show loan applications. I'll try to do it another way. From there, it should be able to list my records, and I should be able to run my prompt. All right. Okay, so it didn't find my loan application record. Let me try maybe once more. I swear it was working before I went on stage. I love the demo gods are really being mean to me today. I need some positive vibes. Send me some good energy here. I did this countless times, but is it going to work? If not, I can try something else. I will try to create a clone of this, because it could be that I don't have the permissions to use it. Let me actually, I'm going to try something else. I'm going to use another user there. I may try to, actually no. Let me grant, how can I do this? Well, I'm going to try, okay. I'm going to run it through the flow. It should work through the flow there. So I have the same prompt set up here. So I'm going to run it through here. It's not going to be as impressive because we won't be able to see the detail, but this will run my flow that we have seen there. And it should get me the right information and display it. So this is using, this time, the Agent API. Maybe I had a bug in the user interface. But this is taking a bit of time. And, oh, sorry, wrong prompt. That was still using the AI course example I had before. Nevertheless, let me try one last time to get the right prompt with another scenario. And if this doesn't work, you'll have to trust me, but it does work. Let's try this. So this behind the scenes calls the different components, the different agents, and it should get us, still it can't see it. All right. Well, let's try one last thing, running the flow directly in here. I don't know if it will work better, but let me try again. Well, let's see. So at least the tool is well built. We can see the debug information. And with that, we should be able to get to our output. Let's see. Running. Yep. And we got the agent response there. All right, well, I won't get better than that. But normally, the whole flow worked, and you should have been able to see that the loan application was validated. I'm sorry about this glitch, but it does work when you set up everything correctly. All right, back to the slides, just to finish quickly with what I wanted to share with you today. In short, we saw the different technologies that compose the agentic stack. We saw A2A at the top, MCP just under it, and the APIs that are still a key part of the agentic experience. We saw that we have the ability now to create a new dimension of experience running autonomous agents that can be triggered autonomously by backend systems. We saw the ability, or we should have seen the ability, to distribute the work across multiple agents. And what we see here, and I think that's a good testament of this, is that testing is hard. One day it works, the other day it doesn't. And with the fact that AI is not stochastic, we cannot reliably replicate this over and over again. We're building tools, I mean, Salesforce is building tools, and other enterprise systems are building tools to help reduce the amount of friction when we adopt these, but it still remains one of the major challenges. Testability and observability are the key things that will probably evolve. And again, the ability to do agent-to-agent interactions with more of standard protocol like A2A are really going to be a game changer there. With that, I want to invite you to get started and explore these technologies, and I'm going to leave you with a couple of resources to do so. Everything that I've covered today is behind this QR code of this short link. You'll find documentation for the different technologies that I shared today. You have blog posts about these technologies and videos of examples that we've been building for these technologies. And you have also a link to our public API workspace if you want to experiment with the Agent API. With that, I want to thank you so much for being here and bearing with me. And I'm going to be taking questions if you have any. If you do have questions, please go up to the microphone because we're recording this session, and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.